The bullet went into the headboard 2 inches above Lenora Voss's face. She did not scream. She opened her eyes and saw the hole in the wood still smoking, smelled the gunpowder, felt the splinters on her cheek like hot needles. A man stood in her bedroom doorway. Tall, brown duster. Revolver still raised, still aimed at the place where her head had been 1 second before he lifted the barrel. Moonlight caught his face. She knew him. She had known him for 6 weeks. She had fed him. She had let her daughter ride on his shoulders. She had set a 3rd plate at the breakfast table that morning without thinking about why. His name was Judson. His real name, the one she had found on a letter in his saddlebag 4 days ago, was Judson Crale. And he had just fired a bullet into her bed to show her he could kill her. And to show himself he couldn't. "Get up," he said. His voice was shaking. The gun was shaking. Everything about him was shaking except his eyes. "I need you to tell me the truth, right now, tonight, before I lose the part of me that moved the barrel." Lenora sat up slowly. Splinters fell from her hair. In the next room, a sound. Hattie, awake now. The gunshot. Lenora's blood turned to ice. She looked at Judson. She looked at the gun. She looked at the wall between her and her daughter. "Put it down," she whispered. "Put it down or shoot me, but do not let my daughter see you holding that." Judson's jaw clenched. His hand trembled. Then the gun lowered. 1 inch. 2. All the way. He holstered it. His hand came away empty and stayed empty. In the silence that followed, they could both hear Hattie through the wall, whimpering, calling out the only name she trusted. "Judson? Judson! I heard a bang. Please like and subscribe. I promised my mom to get 1,000 views this month." Lenora closed her eyes. The cruelty of it. Her daughter calling for the man who had just put a bullet in her mother's bed. Calling his name like a prayer. Like safety. Lenora opened her eyes and looked at Judson Crale and saw something she had not expected. He was crying, not sobbing. He was the kind of man who had never learned how. But tears ran down his face in 2 straight lines, catching moonlight, and his mouth was pressed shut so hard the muscles in his jaw looked like rope. He had heard it too. The child's voice. His name in her mouth. The absolute, devastating trust of a 4-year-old girl who had no idea that the man she loved had just tried to kill her mother. "Tell me what happened to my brother," he said. His voice was barely there. "Tell me what Everett did to you. And do not lie, because I found the grave 3 weeks ago, and I have been sleeping 20 feet from it every night trying to decide what to do. And tonight, I ran out of time." Lenora stood. She pulled a shawl around her shoulders. She walked past him, close enough to touch, and she did not flinch. She went to Hattie's room. She picked up her daughter, held her, whispered into her hair. "It's okay, baby. Just thunder. Go back to sleep." It didn't sound like thunder. Sometimes thunder sounds different. Close your eyes. Hattie's arms tightened around her neck. "Is Judson okay?" "He's okay." "Promise?" "Promise." She held her daughter until the breathing slowed, until the small body went heavy, until the grip on her neck loosened into the limp trust of a sleeping child. Then she laid Hattie down. She pulled the blanket up. She walked back to the hallway where Judson was leaning against the wall with his head tipped back and his eyes closed, and his hands, the hands that had fixed her fence, carried her daughter and fired a bullet 2 inches from her face, hanging open at his sides. "Sit down," Lenora said. She walked to the kitchen. She lit the stove. She put water on for coffee. Her hands were steady. She had used up her shaking a long time ago, spent it all on the night she swung the skillet, and there was none left for tonight. Judson sat at the kitchen table. The table with 3 plates. He looked at the 3rd plate. His plate. And something in his face collapsed like a barn in a storm. Lenora poured 2 cups. She sat across from him. She looked at the man who had ridden into Copper Hollow 6 weeks ago with a dead brother's name and a loaded gun and a letter that said, "Make it right." She looked at the bullet hole she could see through the bedroom doorway, still smoking faintly in the moonlight. She looked at his empty hands. "You want to know what happened to your brother?" she said. "Yes." "Then I need to start before your brother. I need to start with the man who sent him. Marsh. Marsh." She took a breath. "This is going to take a while." She took a sip of coffee. He did not touch his. And Lenora Voss began to tell the truth for the first time in 7 months. The stove crackled. The coffee cooled. And through the wall, Hattie slept with her hand curled around a wooden horse carved by a dead man, dreaming of thunder that did not sound like thunder. 8 months earlier. The first time Everett Crale walked into Copper Hollow, 3 women turned their heads, and 1 man dropped a crate of apples. He was tall, fair-haired, with a grin that arrived before he did and stayed after he left. He wore a clean shirt, good boots, and a hat tilted at the angle that says, "I am not trying while trying very hard." He found Lenora at the feed store counting coins in her palm, 12 cents trying to cover 20 cents of oats. Her husband Thomas had died of typhus the winter before. The bank had sent 2 mortgage notices. She had burned both. Everett tipped his hat. "That is a lot of oats for 1 woman." Lenora did not look up. "I have a horse. Must be a big horse." "It is. Good day." He came back every day for a week. He brought gifts, a sack of flour, a jar of honey, a small wooden horse he had carved for Hattie, crooked, 1 ear longer than the other. Lenora refused everything at first. Then she accepted the horse because Hattie had already named it. Then the flour because Hattie was hungry. Then Everett's offer to fix the fence because pride was not strong enough to let her child go cold. He was patient. He told stories about his brother Judson in Denver. "The serious one," he laughed, "got our daddy's frown and our mama's stubborn heart." He made Hattie giggle until milk came out her nose. He made the kitchen smell like cedar shavings and possibility. And Lenora watched him with Hattie on his knee and felt something she had not felt since Thomas. Not love, not yet, but the absence of fear. For a woman who had been afraid a very long time, the absence of fear felt close enough to love to be dangerous. 2 months in, he proposed. Not with a ring, with a deed. He had bought 40 acres east of her farm. Marsh's money, though Lenora did not know that. He laid the paper on the table and said, "I want to build a house here, next to yours, close enough to hear you if you ever call." Lenora looked at the deed. She looked at Hattie drawing circles on Everett's palm. She said yes, not because she was in love, because she was tired of doing everything alone. She told herself that was close enough. That evening, Everett sat on the porch with whiskey and wrote a letter to Judson. Drunk? Sloppy? Honest the way only drunk men are. Judd. Found a good place. Good woman, too. Partner set the whole thing up. Courtship's a business play. Mineral rights are the real target. But I don't mind the work. He sealed it and sent it. He did not know those drunken words would one day save the woman inside. He also did not know that in 6 weeks she would kill him. But the night was warm and the whiskey was smooth, and Everett Crale had never thought about consequences. It was his gift. It was also the thing that would put him in the ground. The deed he had given Lenora, the one that made her say yes, the one that made her feel chosen, had been bought with Declan Marsh's money. Every dollar, every acre, every smile, a transaction disguised as tenderness. And Lenora, who had survived typhus and debt and a year of raising a child alone, could not see the bars of the cage because they had been painted to look like a garden gate. In the kitchen, across from Judson, Lenora paused. She looked into her coffee. "I thought he was good," she said. "I needed him to be good." Judson said nothing, but his hand, flat on the table, curled slowly into a fist. Because he had thought Everett was good too, and he was beginning to understand what that mistake had cost. "When did it start?" Judson asked. His voice was flat, controlled, the voice of a man holding himself together with his teeth. Lenora looked at the table. "The hitting?" "Yes. 2 weeks after the proposal." She said it like a date, like a fact, like something she had written down in a ledger. Across from her, Judson's fist tightened on the table. His knuckles went white. She continued. "It started with absences. 3 days in Helena," Everett said, "buying lumber." But his boots came back clean. No sawdust. He smelled like perfume she did not own. She said nothing. She had learned from Thomas, from her father, from every man who had ever touched her life, that asking questions made things worse. The first time was a Tuesday. Hattie was napping. Lenora asked where he had been. Just the question. His hand came fast, open palm across her mouth. She tasted copper. He blinked, as if surprised by his own body. "I am sorry," he said. "That will not happen again." She believed him. Women in her position always believe the first apology. It is the last luxury they can afford. The second time, 3 days later, he did not apologize. He said she put too much salt in the stew. The bruise spread across her cheekbone like a dark flower blooming in fast motion. She told Bertie Gaines she had fallen. Bertie put an extra tin of peaches in the bag without charging and said nothing. But her eyes said everything. The third time he used his fist. Lenora's head hit the kitchen door frame. When her vision cleared, Hattie was standing in the hallway. 3 years old, not crying, just watching, with eyes that were already learning what the world looked like when the people supposed to protect you become the people you need protection from. Lenora stopped. She looked at Judson across the table. "Do you want me to stop?" "No. The next part is the worst part." "I know." She took a breath. Then came the last night. Hattie asleep. Everett drunk. Lenora at the stove, her back to the room, every muscle locked. He grabbed her arm so hard she felt the bone shift. "You think you're better than me." He threw her against the wall. Her head hit the doorframe. Same spot, same crack of light behind her eyes. When her vision cleared, he was coming again. Fist raised, eyes empty. She reached behind her, and her hand found the cast-iron skillet on the stove. She did not think. She swung. "The sound it made," Lenora said quietly, looking at the table. "That is the thing I cannot get away from. Not what I saw, what I heard." She paused. A wet crack, like a branch breaking inside a bag of flour. Across from her, Judson's face was the color of chalk. His fist on the table had not unclenched. "He fell," Lenora said. "He did not get up." Silence. And from the hallway. Hattie. Same hallway. Same doorway. Looking at him on the floor. Looking at me. Looking at the blood on the doorframe that matched the blood on my face. Her voice dropped to nothing. She said, "Is he sleeping?" Lenora closed her eyes. When she opened them, they were dry. I told her yes. I picked her up. I held her until morning. And when the sun came up and I could see his face, I knew he was dead. And I knew that in Copper Hollow, a widow who kills a man, even a man who was killing her, does not get a trial. She gets a rope. Judson sat motionless. His cup of coffee had gone cold. His face had gone through something: grief, rage, recognition, shame, and come out the other side looking like bare wood stripped by a river. "I buried him behind the barn," Lenora said. "It took until noon. Hattie sat on the porch and ate a biscuit and watched me dig without understanding why. I told her I was planting a tree." She let out a breath that sounded like it had been held for 7 months. "That is what happened to your brother, Judson. He beat me. I killed him. I buried him. And then I sat in this kitchen every night for 7 months and waited for someone to come." She looked at the bullet hole through the bedroom doorway. And then someone did. The stove crackled. The coffee was cold. Judson unclenched his fist. He spread his fingers flat on the table. He looked at them for a long time. "In Dodge City," he said slowly. 3 years ago, a woman named Ada Purcell ended up in the hospital. Broken jaw, cracked ribs. She told the sheriff she fell downstairs." He paused. "Everett told me the same thing." Lenora looked at him. "Did you believe him?" Judson closed his eyes. "Yes." One word. It carried the weight of a coffin. "Who is Declan Marsh?" Judson asked. Dawn was beginning to gray the kitchen windows. They had been at the table for 2 hours. The coffee pot was empty. Lenora's voice was hoarse. Hattie had not stirred. Somewhere outside, a rooster announced the coming morning like it was any other day. Lenora told him. While the sun climbed over Copper Hollow and lit up the yard where a child's dress hung on the clothesline, she told Judson about the man who had knocked on her door 3 weeks after the burial. While Hattie slept with one hand curled around the wooden horse, Lenora described Marsh's pressed suit, his rehearsed smile, the way he looked past her at the doorframe where soap had failed to remove the faint, dark smear in the wood grain. While the chickens scratched in the yard and the barn owl returned to its roost, she repeated what Marsh had said. "I am looking for Everett Crale. He owes me a considerable sum." And what she had answered. He left, middle of the night, did not say where. And while the morning filled the kitchen with ordinary light, she watched Judson's face change as he understood what his brother had really been. "Marsh sent him," Judson said. "Not a question. Marsh funded the trip. Marsh bought the deed. The courtship was a strategy. The land was never about farming. No. There is copper under the East Ridge. I did not know that until Marsh came back. But yes." Judson leaned back. He looked at the ceiling. He pressed his palms against his eyes. He stayed like that for a long time. "Marsh wrote me a letter," he said. "He said you poisoned Everett for his money." "I know. I read it. In your saddlebag. 4 days ago." Judson lowered his hands. He stared at her. "You knew." "I knew." "For 4 days." "Yes." "Why didn't you run?" Lenora looked at him and told the truth. The real truth. The one underneath the one she had already told. "Because I watched you check your gun every night through the gap in the barn wall where the board has warped. I heard the click of the cylinder. I counted the seconds of silence after. And every night, you put it down." She paused. "A man who is going to kill me does not put the gun down, Judson. A man who is trying to decide does." The kitchen was quiet. Somewhere outside, Hattie's rooster crowed again. "So I let you decide," Lenora said. "Night after night. I lay in my bed, listening to you fight yourself through a barn wall, and I waited to find out if the man who fixed my daughter's window was the same man who would put a bullet in her mother." She looked at the hole in the headboard through the doorway. "Tonight, I got my answer." Judson followed her gaze. 2 inches. The distance between the hole in the wood and the place where Lenora's head had been. 2 inches between murder and mercy. Between one kind of man and another. He looked at his hands, the hands that had fired the shot, that had fixed the fence, that had caught Hattie when she fell. The same hands, the same man. He did not know which one he was yet. He only knew which one he wanted to be. "Marsh will come back," he said. "I know. He wants the land, the copper. He will bring lawyers, maybe guns. I know. He paid me to kill you. When I don't deliver, he will find someone else, or he will come himself." Lenora nodded. She had known this since the day she read the letter. She had run the math in the dark every night while listening to a gun being checked and set down. She had already decided. "Then we need to be ready," she said. Judson looked at her. This woman who had buried a man with her bare hands, raised a child alone for 7 months, lain still while a loaded gun pointed at her face, and was now drinking cold coffee and making plans. "You are not afraid of me," he said. "I was terrified of you," she answered. "For 11 minutes tonight I thought I was going to die. But I did not move because Hattie was in the next room, and if I screamed, she would have come running and seen everything." She set down her cup. "I am not brave, Judson. I am a mother. There is a difference." The days that followed were strange, not warm, not cold, something in between that did not have a name. Judson moved his things out of the barn and slept on the kitchen floor. Not because Lenora asked, because he could no longer sleep near the grave. Lenora did not comment. She stepped around his bedroll in the mornings. She made coffee for 2. Hattie was the only one who acted like nothing had changed. She sat on Judson's chest before dawn and said, "Wake up. The chickens are being loud." She dragged him to the creek to look for frogs. She fell asleep against his shoulder on the porch every evening, and every evening he carried her to bed and stood in the doorway afterward, looking at the bullet hole in the headboard that Lenora had not repaired, and he felt the weight of what he had almost done settle into his bones like lead. They did not talk about that night. They talked about Marsh. They talked about what was coming. Judson told her about Everett's drunken letter. The one that named Marsh, described the scheme, admitted the courtship was a business play. "If that letter reaches the territorial judge in Helena," Judson said, "Marsh loses everything. Not just the land, his licenses, his other properties, everything." Lenora looked at him. "You have kept that letter for 6 weeks." "Yes. Why?" He was quiet for a long time. "Because I did not know if I was going to use it to save you or bury you." She held his gaze. He did not look away. "And now?" she asked. "Now I know." He reached into his coat. He set Everett's letter on the table between them. "This is yours," he said, "to use however you want." Lenora picked it up. She read it. Everett's handwriting. Loose, sloppy, drunk. Partner set the whole thing up. Courtship's a business play. She folded it carefully and placed it inside her mother's Bible on the kitchen shelf. "If he comes," she said, "I will need you standing beside me. Not behind me. Not in front of me. Beside." Judson nodded. "I can do that." One afternoon, Hattie tripped near the barn and fell hard. Judson caught her before she hit the ground. She wrapped her arms around his neck and pressed her wet face into his shoulder. "You caught me," she said. Something inside Judson Crale that had been sealed for 31 years cracked open. He held her. His eyes burned. She pulled back and studied his face. "You're sad," she said. "I'm fine." "No, you're sad, but that's okay." She put both her small hands on his cheeks. "You can be sad here. We don't mind." That night on the porch, stars sharp and close, Lenora sat beside him. Not the distance of strangers, not the closeness of lovers, the distance of 2 people who have seen each other at their absolute worst and have not yet decided what that makes them. I have a question, she said. Ask. 2 inches. He went still. You moved the barrel. Before you pulled the trigger, you moved it 2 inches, and you fired. She looked at him. Why did you fire at all? If you were not going to kill me, why pull the trigger? He stared at the dark yard. A long time passed. Because I needed to hear it, he said. The sound. I needed to hear the gun go off and know that the bullet was not in you. I needed my body to understand what my head already knew. He paused. That I was not going to do it. That is the most terrifying thing anyone has ever said to me. I know. And also the most honest. He looked at her. She looked at him. The space between them was the width of a hand. Neither of them closed it. But neither of them moved apart. Marsh came on a Sunday. 5 riders from the East Road. Pressed suit, lawyer, surveyor, 2 rifles. He dismounted in the yard and looked around, at the mended fence, the cleared garden, the laundry on the line, and smiled the smile of a man who has already counted his money. Judson was splitting wood. He set down the axe. Lenora was inside. She saw them through the window. She carried Hattie upstairs. Stay here, baby. Why? Because Mama said so. She kissed Hattie's head. She came back down. She stepped onto the porch. She stood beside Judson, not behind him, not in front, beside. Marsh looked at them standing together, and his smile flickered. The first crack in the porcelain. He had expected a job completed. He had expected Lenora in the ground, and Judson on his way back to Denver with blood on his hands and silence in his mouth. Instead, he saw a man and a woman standing shoulder to shoulder on a porch that had been repaired, looking at him like a wall he was not going to get through. Mr. Crale, Marsh said, you were paid for a specific outcome. I was. And yet the outcome appears to be carpentry. Judson did not smile. Things change. Marsh's eyes went to Lenora. He studied her the way he studied ledgers. She told you a story, didn't she? A story about how Everett was the villain and she was the victim. She told me the truth, Judson said. A truth you already knew, because you sent him here knowing what he was. You hired a man who put a woman in a hospital in Dodge City, and you pointed him at a widow with a 4-year-old and called it a business strategy. Marsh's jaw tightened. Whatever Everett did in his personal was your weapon, Judson finished. You loaded it. You aimed it, and it went off in the wrong direction. That is not Lenora's fault. That is yours. He reached into his coat. The rifleman shifted. Judson stopped. Slowly, he pulled out the letter, Everett's letter, the drunken one. He held it up so Marsh could see the handwriting. My brother wrote this the night he proposed to her. He was drunk. He described the whole arrangement. Courtship is a business play. Mineral rights are the real target. Your name is on it, Marsh. Your scheme in his handwriting. Marsh's face went the color of old paper. Behind him, the lawyer was already walking to his horse. One rifleman lowered his barrel, then the other. Marsh stood alone in the dirt, his pressed suit suddenly absurd, his arithmetic suddenly wrong. This is not finished, he said. Judson shook his head. It is, because if you come back, I will not write to a judge. I will handle it the way you paid me to handle things. He let that settle. And you know exactly how that ends. Marsh looked at the letter. He looked at Judson. He looked at Lenora standing beside him, a woman he had tried to destroy through 2 different men, and who was still standing, still upright, still refusing to fall. Something moved in his face. Not fear, not calculation. Something older. The recognition that he had met someone stronger than himself and had not known it until too late. He mounted his horse. He rode east. He did not look back. The dust hung in the air for a long time. Lenora exhaled. Judson exhaled. The distance between them, standing shoulder to shoulder on the porch they had rebuilt, was 0. But neither of them said a word. They just stood there, breathing, while the dust settled, and the sun moved, and the world slowly, carefully, began to change shape. Then the screen door banged. Hattie marched out. She looked at the empty road. She looked at her mother. She looked at Judson. She put her hands on her hips. Were those the bad men? They're gone, baby. Are they coming back? No. Good. She looked at Judson. Are you staying? He looked down at this child, 4 years old, hands on her hips, demanding an answer with the authority of a tiny general. Yeah, he said. I'm staying. She nodded once, hard. Good, because the chickens need feeding and I can't reach the bucket. She grabbed his hand and pulled him off the porch. He went. That night, Hattie asleep. The house quiet. Judson sat on the porch steps. Lenora came out. She sat beside him. Close. Closer than before. The distance between them had changed during the day, narrowed by a shared enemy and a shared victory and a 4-year-old girl who did not understand what had almost happened and therefore treated it as already resolved. There is something I need to say, Judson said. Say it. I fired a gun in your house, 2 inches from your face, while your daughter slept in the next room. He looked at his hands. There is no amount of fence I can fix that earns that back. No roof, no well pump, nothing. Lenora was quiet. I know, she said. I'm not asking you to forget it. I won't, ever. Then what are you asking me? She thought for a long time. The wind moved through the grass. Somewhere in the valley, a coyote called. I am asking you to carry it, she said. The way I carry the skillet, the way I carry the sound it made, and Hattie's voice in the doorway asking if he was sleeping. I carry that every day. I will carry it for the rest of my life. She looked at him. You carry the 2 inches. You carry the bullet hole. You carry the 11 minutes you stood over me with a loaded gun while I pretended to sleep. Her voice softened. And we carry them together, because I am very tired of carrying things alone. Judson looked at the stars. He looked at the garden that was starting to come back. He looked at the ground behind the barn where wildflowers had pushed through packed earth in the months since spring. He thought about Everett, not the monster, not the charmer, but the boy in the photograph. The older brother who had taught him to ride, who had once carried him a mile through snow when he was too small to walk. That boy was gone, had maybe never existed the way Judson remembered. Memory is kind to the dead, and the dead do not correct it. I need to tell you something, Judson said, something I have not told anyone. Tell me, when I stood in your room tonight, before I fired, I thought about pulling the trigger for real. He let the words land. For about 3 seconds, I wanted to, because if you were guilty, then Everett was the brother I remembered. And if you were innocent, then my whole life, every memory I have of him, every time he made me laugh, every time he protected me, was a lie. He looked at her. I almost killed you so I could keep loving him. Lenora did not move. She did not pull away. She sat with that sentence the way a woman sits with a wound that needs cleaning, still, braced, enduring. And then Hattie said your name, Lenora said, through the wall. And then Hattie said my name. And the barrel moved. And the barrel moved. Silence, long and wide and full of everything that had led them to this porch. I cannot promise I am a good man, Judson said. I can promise I am trying to become one. Lenora took his hand that had held a gun and held her daughter and split her wood and fired a bullet 2 inches from her sleeping face. She held it. "That is enough," she said. "For now, that is enough." The wind moved through the valley. The stars were sharp, and the candle in the upstairs window, the one Lenora had lit every night for 7 months, waiting for something to end or someone to come, stayed dark. She did not light it. There was no need. Someone was already here. 6 months later, they married. Not in a church. Copper Hollow did not have one. They married in the vegetable garden, the one that had been losing its war with weeds when Judson first arrived and was now feeding half the town. Bertie Gaines stood as witness, dabbing her eyes with a flour-dusted handkerchief. Doc Prentice read the vows from a borrowed book. Hattie wore a crown of wildflowers she had picked herself from the ground behind the barn, from the soft earth where something terrible had been buried and something beautiful had grown over it. She did not know what was beneath the flowers. She only knew they were the prettiest ones on the whole farm. When she placed one behind Lenora's ear and said, "Now you're pretty too, Mama," every grown person in the garden looked away because they could not hold what they were feeling. When the preacher asked if anyone objected, Hattie raised her hand. The yard went silent. "I object," she said, very seriously, "unless I get cake." Judson laughed. It was the first time Lenora had ever heard him laugh. It sounded like a locked door opening, like a man who had been holding his breath for 31 years, finally letting go. Lenora looked at his face and thought, "So that is what you look like when you are not carrying the weight of the world." And she fell in love with him right there, 6 months late, standing in a garden built on everything that had tried to destroy her. That night, Judson burned 2 things in the fireplace: Marcia's letter and a tin photograph of 2 boys standing beside a creek. Lenora watched the edges curl and blacken. "You don't want to keep it?" she asked. He looked at Hattie, asleep on the rug, the wooden horse in her hand. The horse carved by the man in the ground, held by the girl who grew flowers over him without knowing, loved by the woman who had killed him to survive, watched over by the brother who had come to avenge him and stayed to become her father. "I kept what matters," he said. "The rest is just ash." The candle in the upstairs window was never lit again. The bullet hole in the headboard was never repaired. Lenora kept it, not as a reminder of what Judson had almost done, as proof of the 2 inches that separated the man he had been from the man he chose to become. Some mornings, when the light came through the window and caught the splintered wood at just the right angle, it almost looked like a star. Hattie thought it was a star. She told the chickens about it. She told Biscuit the barn cat. She told everyone who would listen that there was a star in her mama's bedroom that appeared the night the thunder came. And nobody corrected her. Because in Copper Hollow, some stories are truer when a child tells them. If this story moved you, leave a number 1 in the comments, and if it feels right, you're welcome to subscribe. I love you all.